On August 8, 2026, 11 cavers were camped 3,000 meters above the Kermanshah Plain at the mouth of Ghar, Parau, for decades the deepest known cave in Iran. It drops through the Zagros in a staircase of 9 pitches on 600 meters of fixed rope in air that sits at 4 degrees all year. 11 people were on the surface that morning, and 2 teams were working below them. 3 of those cavers were going deep, down to the bottom of the 6th pitch. Their call-out was 30 hours out. What does a big expedition ask of you that a 3-person trip never does? The answer is bookkeeping. On a small trip, you can see everybody you are responsible for. On a big one, you have to trust a written line instead. Ladan was 31, a Tehran caver with 90 caves behind her, and she sent her brother a photograph of the entrance before every single trip. She was the strongest climber on the expedition, and the slowest to say so. Bijan was 45, the rigger, 20 years in this mountain. Mitra was 38, the leader, and her habit was the board. Every name chalked in on the way down and rubbed out on the way up, every trip. Because a cave does not tell you who is still inside it. The 6th pitch is the long one, 90 meters of hanging rope in a shaft wide enough to lose your light in. The plan was 2 shifts running past each other, 400 meters of gallery below the 6th, 3 survey stations, everybody out inside 14 hours. The Derig team would come behind them, stripping rope from the top 4 pitches, because the expedition was ending, and rope is money. What they didn't know was that the board carried 11 names that morning, and only 10 stood in the right column. They clipped into the first pitch at 7 and went down into the mountain. The early hours ran the way good expeditions do, descenders hissing on the long hangs, boots knocking grit off the ledges, carabiners clicking at every rebelay. At the bottom of the 6th, 5 hours in and on schedule, Bijan and Mitra turned for the surface, while Ladan stayed to finish 1 survey leg alone. She told them 20 minutes. What she did not know was that her name had been rubbed off the board an hour earlier, when somebody counted heads at the camp and got 11. 40 minutes later, that is when the mountain failed her, because she came back to the foot of the 6th pitch and put her light up the shaft and found nothing hanging in it. 90 meters of empty air stood over her, and a wall she could not climb, and 4 more stripped pitches above that one. She shouted twice. The shaft took the sound and gave her nothing back. She walked the foot of the shaft with her light up, looking for a tail of rope, a knot, anything somebody might have left clipped to the wall. There was nothing on that wall but bolts. Here is what you need to understand about a derigged pitch. It is not a delay, it is a wall. A caver at the bottom of a stripped 90-meter shaft is as far from the surface as a caver on the moon. And this is where the arithmetic stops being about skill and starts being about how long a body holds 4 degrees. So what does 4 degrees mean 600 meters down? It takes about a degree an hour out of somebody sitting still on rock. It also means 30 hours before anybody is required to come looking for you. The first hour was the worst. The rope was gone. Her shouts died. Nobody was coming. She had 1 spare light, a survey notebook, a liter of water, and a foil blanket the size of a paperback. 600 meters above her, the Derig team was coiling the 4th pitch when Bijan asked where Ladan was sitting. Mitra told him she was on the surface, because the board said so. Bijan said the board was wrong, and he said it loudly, in front of everybody. And then he said he was going back down on the ropes they had not yet pulled. Mitra told him no, and when he reached for the bag, she told him no again. A man 19 hours awake does not rig 90 meters of shaft alone in the dark. The cave had already taken 1 person that day because somebody moved too fast with a piece of chalk. Watch a leader spend an hour she does not believe she has. What they did instead took 4 hours and no heroics at all. Mitra put 2 rested cavers on the re-rig, sent them down in pairs with a radio at every pitch head, and stood at the top counting people out loud. Because this is the arithmetic of a rescue on stripped rope. Every pitch they re-rig is a pitch they must climb twice. And a tired rigger is how you turn one casualty into three. 600 meters below them, Ladan did the only thing that was hers to do. She turned her light off. She sat on her rope bag with the foil round her shoulders, in a dark so complete that it has weight, and she counted survey stations out loud from memory, backwards, to keep her jaw from locking up. Put yourself at the bottom of that shaft for 1 minute of the 11 hours. 4 degrees, no rope overhead, and a light you are rationing by the minute. And then add the arithmetic of a call-out that is still 20 hours away. Would you have kept the light on for the company, or saved it for the climb you might get? She saved it, and she says the counting was what kept the dark from getting inside her. The first re-rig light came over the lip of the 6th pitch at 2:30 in the morning, 11 hours after she found the shaft empty and understood that she was trapped. She climbed all 9 pitches on her own jammers because she asked to, and Bijan climbed the last 4 beside her without saying anything at all. The expedition report recorded a name rubbed from the board in error, a pitch series de-rigged with a caver still below it, and 11 hours at 4 degrees in the deepest cave in the country. A cave does not tell you who is still inside it, Mitra still teaches, and she teaches it with her own mistake as the example. The report recorded 90 meters, 11 hours, and 1 name in the wrong column, and Ladan sent her brother the photograph from the plateau at dawn. On August 2nd, 2026, 3 cavers stood at the rim of Luweng Jomblang in the Gunung Sewu karst of central Java, in air that smelled of wet leaf mold and bat guano, listening to water drip somewhere under their boots. It is the deepest single-drop entrance in this karst, 60 meters straight down into a forest that grows at the bottom of a hole. The shaft takes 60 meters of rope on a single free hang, and the floor of it is limestone blocks under wet leaf litter at a temperature that never moves off 24 degrees. 3 of them were going down that morning to rig a training line for a club course the following week. Their call-out was 6 hours out. What does a warm cave ask of you that a cold one never does? Complacency, mostly. Cold keeps you honest because it hurts. A cave at 24 degrees lets you feel comfortable all the way to the thing that kills you. Ayu was 28, a Jogjakarta instructor who had taught on this shaft more than 200 times, and she texted her mother a single word from the rim before every trip. She had been caving since she was 17, and she was the person the club sent first because she was never in a hurry. Ranga was 39, 6 years in the club, strong and impatient in equal measure. Dewey was 44, the safety officer, and her habit was the bar count. Every rack counted out loud at the pitch head, bar by bar, every trip, because a descender is the only piece of gear you cannot test by pulling on it. A rack controls a caver by friction, and friction comes from bars. Add bars and you go slower. Take bars off, and the rope runs faster through your hand. The plan was small and ordinary. 60 meters down the main hang, 2 hours rigging the training traverse, back up the same rope, out inside 5 hours. They had 2 heavy bags of hardware to send down first. What they didn't know was that the second bag weighed 19 kilos, and that nobody had weighed it. They rigged at 8, and the first hour ran the way a good morning runs. Rope creaking as it took the load, carabiners clicking at the rebelay, boots scuffing on wet limestone, birds calling somewhere up in the daylight. Ayu went down first and clean, rigged the traverse, and came back up for the hardware. Ranga clipped the 19-kilo bag to his harness and threaded his rack at the pitch head while Dewey was 40 meters away, coiling. What he did not know was that he had threaded 4 bars instead of 6, and that the bag on his harness had just made him half again as heavy as the man the rack was set for. 8 meters below the lip, that is when the mountain failed him, because the rope stopped feeding through the rack and started running through it instead, and the sound changed from a hiss to something closer to tearing. He gripped the rope with his free hand, which is what everybody does, and the rope took the skin off his palm in under a second. He fell 52 meters in 11 seconds. The bag hit first. He landed on top of it, on leaf litter over limestone blocks. Here is what you need to understand about an uncontrolled descent. The rack does not break. It works exactly as designed, at a speed nobody chose. The gear is innocent, the arithmetic is not. And this is where a training day stops being about skill and starts being about a broken pelvis at the bottom of a hole. So what does a fall like that mean in a shaft with one rope in it? It means the only person who can reach him is already at the bottom. It also means the only way out for both of them is the rope he just came down. The first minutes were chaos. He was screaming. Panic went up the rope. Nobody could see him. Ayu reached him in 40 seconds and found him conscious, gray, with his right leg turned wrong and blood coming through the fabric at the hip. 40 meters up, Dewey had her descender in her hand and one boot already over the lip. Ayu shouted at her to stop, and she shouted it twice. The rope Ranga had just run at speed had a glazed band in its sheath, and nobody had eyes on how far the damage went. Putting a second person on it in a hurry was how a bad morning became a body count. Dewey did not like being told. She was the safety officer, and she was twice Ayu's age. She took her boot back off the lip and went for the spare rope instead. Watch the youngest person on a rope team give an order to the oldest. What they did instead took 3 hours. Dewey rigged the second rope from an independent tree anchor 12 meters back from the rim, dropped it clear of the first, and called the rescue number that a Java caving club keeps taped inside every helmet. Because this is the arithmetic of a glazed rope. Heat damage you can see is heat damage that has already gone through the sheath, and the part you cannot see is the part that is holding. 60 meters down, Ayu did the only thing that was hers to do. She kept him talking. She splinted his leg with a tackle bag and 2 rigging poles, packed the hip wound with the dressing from her own kit, and kept asking him the names of the students on next week's course until he could get them in the right order. Put yourself at the bottom of that shaft for 1 minute of the 4 hours, a sky the size of a dinner plate 60 meters up, and one rope in the hole that you do not trust. And then add the arithmetic of a man losing blood at 24 degrees, warm enough to keep him bleeding freely. Would you have gone up that glazed rope, or stayed and kept him talking? She stayed, and she says the names were the only thing she could think of that had answers. The rescue team came over the rim at 1:30 with a stretcher and 40 meters of new rope, 4 hours after the descent failed. They hauled him out on a counterbalance in a little under 2 hours, and he was in Yogyakarta by dark with a fractured pelvis, a broken femur, and both hands bandaged. The club report recorded a rack threaded with 4 bars for a load rigged at 6, a 19-kilo bag clipped to the harness of the man descending, 52 meters of uncontrolled descent, and a second rope rigged from an independent anchor rather than a shared one. Luweng Jomblang is still the deepest single-drop entrance in that karst, 60 meters into a forest at the bottom of a hole. A descender is the only piece of gear you cannot test by pulling on it. Dewey still teaches, and she now counts the bars out loud for people who have rigged the shaft 200 times. The report recorded 4 bars, 19 kilos, and 11 seconds, and Ayu sent her mother the single word from the rim the next time she went down. On August 15th, 2026, 3 cavers walked into the mouth of Vjetrenica above Popovo, Polje, into a wind coming out of the rock hard enough to lift dust off their boots and cold enough to fog their headlamps. It is the longest cave in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and its name means the wind cave because it breathes. That wind is how a caver in there knows the passage ahead of him is still open. 3 of them went in that morning to survey a low crawl 400 meters past the show route, where the roof comes down to the height of a car door. Their call-out was 8 hours out. What does a crawl ask of you that a walking passage never does? Trust in a ceiling you cannot see. On your feet, you look up and read the rock. On your belly, you put your helmet under it and go. Goran was 43. a Mostar caver who had explored this system for 19 years, and he telephoned his daughter from the car park before every trip. He was the smallest shouldered man in the club, which is why he went into tight ground first. Inez was 35, the club surveyor, and she had mapped every meter of that crawl on 4 previous trips. Tomislav was 29, the youngest of the 3, and his habit was the listen. Every trip he stopped at the entrance to a crawl and listened for the wind before he put his body into it, because a passage that has stopped breathing has closed somewhere ahead. The crawl runs 11 meters between 2 chambers, under a ceiling of stacked limestone slabs that the cave dropped there and never cemented. The plan was one shift and nothing clever. 400 meters of walking passage, 3 survey stations in the far chamber, 11 meters of crawl each way, and everybody on the surface inside 8 hours. The wind through it had been getting stronger all summer. What they didn't know was that a fortnight of rain had soaked the clay holding one of those ceiling slabs, and wet clay does not grip limestone the way dry clay does. They went in at 9 and were at the crawl by 10. The first hours ran the way a good survey trip runs. Boots grinding on limestone, the tape hissing out and clicking back, oversuits scraping through, and the wind going past them the whole time. 2 hours in and on schedule, Goran was flat on his side halfway through the crawl, with his helmet under the slabs and his headlamp throwing a beam along the floor in front of him. What he did not know was that the slab above his hips had been carrying wet clay for a fortnight, and that it had already slipped 4 centimeters out of its seat. At 12:10, that is when the mountain failed him, because the slab above his hips came out of the ceiling, and about a ton of limestone came down the crawl in one piece. It buried him from the waist down and stopped 8 centimeters short of the back of his helmet. The wind stopped at the same moment. That is what told Tomislav, 11 meters back at the mouth of the crawl, that something had gone wrong before he heard anything at all. Here's what you need to understand about a collapse in a crawl. The danger is not the rock that fell. It is the rock that did not fall yet. A ceiling that has moved once has a new shape now, and every block you pull out to reach the casualty changes it again. So what does a ton of limestone across the legs mean 400 meters in? It means no stretcher will ever come through that crawl. It also means the man under the rock has to be dug out by the same 2 people who are lying in the passage with him, and that you are now working against a clock inside his own body. Crushed muscle starts changing a man's blood after about 2 hours. The first minutes were bad. The wind had stopped. He was stuck. Nobody could reach his legs. Tomislav got into the crawl far enough to touch his shoulder and found him talking, angry, and pinned from the hips down under rock he could not move with his hands. Goran told them to pull the rock off him, and he told them to do it now, and he kept telling them for a quarter of an hour. Inez said no. She said it from the mouth of the crawl, 11 meters back, in front of the youngest member of the club. 2 people had died in this karst in the last 4 years doing exactly what he was asking for. Pulling blocks out of a ceiling that has just moved is how you end up lying in the rubble beside the man you came to help. She had surveyed every meter of that crawl, and she was the only one of the 3 who knew that the far chamber held loose rock they could wedge under the slab. Goran swore at her twice, and then he stopped, and he did what she said. Watch a surveyor overrule the man who found the passage she is lying in. So what does a rescue look like when speed is the thing that kills? It took 5 hours. They wedged rock under the moved slab from behind, 1 block at a time, taking the weight off the ceiling before they touched his legs. Because this is the arithmetic of a collapse rescue. The fast way and the safe way run in opposite directions, and this is where a club loses 2 people instead of nearly losing 1. 400 meters in, Goran did the only thing that was his to do. He kept his arms in front of his chest so the space stayed his. He lay on his side in a crawl with no wind in it at 11 degrees and counted his own breaths out loud each time a block went in behind him. Put yourself under that ceiling for 1 minute of the 5 hours. 8 centimeters of clearance behind your helmet, and dust coming down through your headlamp beam every time somebody moves. And then add the arithmetic of legs you stopped feeling in the second hour. Would you have let them go slowly, or screamed at them to pull you out? He let them go slowly, and he says the counting was the only part of it he chose. They got his hips free at 5:20 and pulled him out of the crawl feet first on a rope and a folded tackle bag, 5 hours after the ceiling failed. He walked the 400 meters of passage out on his own legs, badly, with Tomislav in front of him and Inez behind, and the wind came back through the crawl before they reached the show route. The club report recorded a ceiling slab loosened by a fortnight of rain, a 1-ton collapse in an 11-meter crawl, a caver pinned for 5 hours, and a rescue that took the weight off the ceiling before it moved a block off his legs. Vjetrenica is still the longest cave in the country, and it still breathes. A passage that has stopped breathing has closed somewhere ahead. Tomislav still teaches, and he teaches it to cavers twice his age. The report recorded 11 meters, 1 ton, and 8 centimeters of clearance, and Goran telephoned his daughter from the car park before the next trip, the same as always.